Well, guys, this is actually a very interesting topic. I know most of the sessions we've had have been relatively didactic with kind of different different things we talk about. OR etiquette was a few months ago. Before that was how to match as an international student with Victor Liu. Before that, different kind of topics that we were really kind of trying to teach while simultaneously having a dialogue. But this one is purely for dialogue purposes. There's no PowerPoint. There's very little information that we're going to be exchanging in terms of research this or stats that. The reason I wanted to kind of have this part of the chat is mainly because I feel like neurosurgery, particularly when I was trying to enter into the field as well, was had this aura of it that you're always in the hospital, you never have time for family or friends. You are always busy, and then ultimately you make multiple huge sacrifices with your love life, with your family life. And while some of that is true, I wanted to have this discussion to help give you guys the most information you can from people who are going through the process now, and for you guys to ask questions. Ultimately, this is geared towards medical students interested in neurosurgery. I'm an intern. Megan's my fiance, so we don't really have much experience yet in terms of maintaining a good family dynamic, love life dynamic. Just kind of our experiences over the last year. This is absolutely informal. This is mainly for everyone, for you guys, for us. If you have any questions, feel free to jump on in directly with just kind of interrupting me, asking questions in the chat box. This is mainly just for all of us to have a discussion and for us to get advice from you guys to get advice from us, and then ultimately, hopefully, you guys can see that neurosurgery is, while a sacrifice in some aspects, shouldn't be a sacrifice that accumulates the entirety of your life, and how to balance things. So ultimately, if you have, again, any questions, feel free to just pop in and ask. And if not, Meg and I are just gonna to start talking. We already have one QA. I love it. Anonymous attendee, how many hours do you guys work on a day in average? So on an average day, any one of the neurosurgery residents, depending on what level they are as interns, we're looking honestly 10 to 12 hours a day pretty regularly. This all averages out over the course of the whole month. We're by nature only supposed to be working for 80 hours a week. That averages out over those 4 weeks. So it could be 90 hours one week, 70 hours another week. And of course, over the course of the whole year, you're also supposed to average that out to roughly 80 hours a week. Sometimes you're going to go more. I've had definitely days where Megan didn't see me for 1 or 2 days, but 2 or 3 days. But but then she'll see me for 3 days straight, and then she'll get sick of me and ask me to go back to the hospital. So, but that's kind of the good question. A good way to kind of start this. Ultimately, neurosurgery is a very big time commitment, and you have a lot of time commitments, particularly as young adults going into any field in medicine. Neurosurgery is not exclusive to this; other surgical subspecialties as well. And so, how do we maintain some semblance of a family life together? I think is very important. So, I think ultimately, and this is part of like the dialogue between us two. I get to learn more about her; she gets to learn more about me as well from this as well. But neurosurgery for us has been a very, very interesting journey. Megan came with me to some of the interviews. Actually, she came to all of the interviews in my top 5 places I was looking at. Just kind of get a sense of not only how we could fit there, but how we as a couple could fit in the residency, the residency vibe over there. So real quickly about Megan and I. Megan and I have been dating for 8 years, and we've actually I asked her to marry me in the peak of COVID, because that's what you do during COVID.
And like right after match.
Right after match,
So it was one celebration after another. But it was like, yay, you're a doctor.
Yeah. And I mean, that actually ties in very nicely with the next question. Did you feel pressure to start a relationship before starting residency, or did it just happen spontaneously? Megan and my relationship happened pretty spontaneously. We knew each other from high school, actually. She didn't date me back then, which was funny and nice, but that's okay. My long-term plan was my long-term plan was in motion. But Megan and I had been together throughout undergrad and medical school. And so it was just an easier transition for us towards residency. I don't think anyone should feel pressured and fundamentally do feel pressured to start a relationship before residency. In fact, a lot of people would have the opposite. You know, you are entering into residency, which is a big time commitment, particularly to junior residents. So you need to be very cognizant of the fact that you are going to have times where it can be very, very stressful, particularly not just between you you yourself, but also your partner, and then the relationship between you and your partner. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely tested at times. So like I remember since I was with him since undergrad, I got to see him through the whole journey, which was full of ups and downs. Like he had more time before, but also when he was studying for step one, it was actually really hard on our relationship because he was there, but he wasn't like in his mind. And so it took a lot getting used to from my perspective, and same with first year of residency. It's been really it's been kind of difficult because we had to change because we were used to hanging out together in undergrad, and we had a long distance relationship, but when we were together, we were like together all the time. And now I go for, like we said before, days without seeing him, and it's just a whole different perspective. And it's something that's not where I feel like, I don't know. I still remember how it was, and it is that way on weekends, especially here in Miami. It's like you can really get away and feel like you're on vacation with one another, which is really nice. Yeah. About living here. So, yeah, it's been a journey so far, and I'm not gonna lie, it's like really rough for sure.
Yeah, and it definitely, you know, I feel it too. Part of it's tricky because, you know, Dr. Morkos, one of our big attendings here, he always I actually spoke with him about this as well, and he when he was in junior, like when he was in residency and junior residency, he actually met his wife while he was within residency itself, not before or necessarily after. And so it's one of those things where multiple different people are going to have multiple different times where they meet their partner, if at all, during residency. In fact, right now, of the 21 Miami residents, 16 are married. Of the rest of the 5, well, technically 2 are married to each other, so I guess I counted them twice. One of our PGY 5s, Evan Luther, one of the PGY 3s, Catherine Barry, they're actually married to each other. So that's their own very interesting dynamic. I wish I could have had them come on as well, but obviously they're in the ORs right now, still probably. But I guess they get to operate together, which must be very fun. Of the remaining, they're either in relationships or single, committed relationships or entirely single. So there's a whole spectrum, and in fact, this is kind of, you know, each program is going to be very different. I went to some places where a lot of them were single, and I went to some places where everyone was married. Maybe like one of the 28 of them or 1 or 2 of them weren't married. So it's gonna be very different for each couple. So do we talk about medicine all the time? That's another question. We do. We talk a lot about medicine. You know, when you're in the hospital, it definitely can encapsulate a good amount of your life. And while we try to be as varied about our conversations as possible, a lot of them do come back towards medicine. Interesting cases that I saw, questions that she has, questions her family has, like random different warts that they're seeing, back pain, you know, all so that stuff. But I think Megan actually herself, you know, has a history in biology and then in sciences. And so it makes it a little bit easier, particularly from my standpoint. I do rely on her a lot to kind of bounce ideas off of, research ideas. In fact, she's helped me on a lot of projects as well, which I think adds a very interesting dynamic to our relationship, that we can be very focused on our project. We can be very focused within medicine, within neurosurgery, with each other as colleagues, then also can separate ourselves entirely from that. I mean, it's very easy. We go outside in Miami.
We do try to separate from it. But even when we're out on walks, he'll be like, oh my gosh, like, this case, blah, blah, blah. And he gets all into it. I mean, I think that's part of you being a neurosurgeon, and that's the lifestyle. And they tell you this, and it's true. It's like, if you want to go into neurosurgery, that's like all you think about. Like, we always say that between each other. I'm like, is there ever a time when we're not talking about neurosurgery? Like, it's it's okay. But at other times I want to talk about like, Smith, look up, look at the view.
Yeah, I mean, particularly because as a junior resident, you're going to be in the hospital a good amount. As the bulk of, for example, Miami, the bulk of the junior call is from the 1, 2, and 3 perspective. And then you start entering into senior call, and then the weekends become a little bit easier, and then you're operating more frequently, so the timings are a little bit different. But it is in the beginning, it is something where our relationship has gone through ups and downs, particularly during residency. But I think one of the things, the take home points, number one, is ultimately finding someone that you ultimately trust and can help you understand your own lifestyle, and that can help understands your lifestyle as well. There are going to be times, and Megan knows that I do prioritize neurosurgery over anything. But then there are going to be times where I prioritize her over studying for things, over for example, scrubbing into very, very, very late cases. There's always going to be an opportunity for that, and I try to get involved as much as possible. But a lot of the times, you do have to protect your time with your loved ones. I think that's a very conscientious thing that you have to do.
I also wanted to give it, I guess if I'm here, I didn't know I would be talking actually. But if I wanted to say something like to a significant other, it would be like, if it's unrelatable to you, like it is to me, I can't imagine being in the hospital that long or doing what you do, saving lives, like with all the pressure. Like check out some like Netflix shows, like the one that I watched. What was it called? The one that you won't watch. I don't know why.
Oh, Lennox Hill.
Lennox Hill. It like just like things like that give me perspective of what it's like being a doctor in a hospital, which no one knows about. Like no layperson knows what that's like. So I wasn't understanding, like, why are you coming home so late or whatever? And then I would see on TV like these devastating cases, and it's like you're there for the patients. And that's something that a significant other might have trouble understanding. And I certainly did, but I'm learning. And I think when I watch those things, it's like I have a lot more understanding, I guess, and I have a lot more patience.
Yeah, definitely. We got a best pickup line, neuro-related and in general. So the pickup line I actually used for Megan. There's a movie called Notting Hill, very old movie. It's with like young Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant. You guys know who that is? I hope so. I don't know if I've just dated myself. But there's a line where it was, I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy asking her to love him. Obviously, I'm the guy and she's the girl, so we had to switch it up. So I was like, I'm just a boy standing in front of a girl asking her to get coffee with him. And she goes,
I'm just a girl standing in front of a boy saying yes.
So boom, that's how I got her.
That wasn't neuro related, but it was general. Yeah. He gets me with movie quotes because my family quotes movies a lot. So I was, yeah.
That's actually the direct pickup line that I use for Megan.
Do you have a neuro one? I'm curious. You're like pretty quick on your feet.
I know, these are tricky. I have like general biology ones, but those are a little bit more kind of PG-13. And since this is, I guess, technically going to be recorded on YouTube, maybe I should say. Yeah, okay. So when there was something I actually kind of want to say. I went to a talk at the AANS in 2017. I remember the talk because one of the foremost neurosurgeons in the nation, Fred Meyer, one of the deans of Mayo Clinic, was presenting, and his talk was about maintaining balance in your life. And the premise of his talk was that he has never missed his children's soccer games, his children's dance recitals, anything like that, because he has made the time to do those things. And I think when I listened to that talk, part of the biggest consternation I had about neurosurgery was this exact situation where you will always have to choose neurosurgery, you will always have to choose medicine first and foremost over everything. And I fundamentally don't believe that is true. And I thought that Dr. Meyer was a great kind of breath of fresh air for that. because he's in the peak of his career, the foremost neurosurgeon in America, and he makes the time consistently to see the people who are most valuable to him. And I thought if someone like that can do it, then someone like I could also do it as well. And so I think the most important thing to take home from that is that when you basically when you have a moment, that moment I believe should be dedicated to your partner. There's gonna be times where you're able to just relax and kind of decompress by yourself, and that's fine. But I think a lot of the times, this is your partner is someone who's very important, and that's something this residency process has really taught me. The amount that I rely on Megan, and I hope that she relies on me, is pretty profound. And I think that relationship is actually what helps me carry myself in residency better. Something as simple as coming home and seeing a familiar face, someone that cares and loves you, is I thought is a very important thing that at least gives you some solace when you come home. So the thing I have to impart upon you guys is you are going to make sacrifices within residency, and you're going to sometimes sacrifice the elements and time in your relationship. But don't forget that you can also sacrifice just some time from residency to make sure that your family is well taken care of. I was interviewing at this one program, like a relatively prestigious program, and one of the residents at that program had a little bit too much to drink, as we all may have a little bit too much here and there. And I remember what he said. Still, he said, neurosurgery is a tough field because at some point in your career, maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, your family is going to hate you. Your friends are going to hate you. Your loved ones are going to hate you because you just don't have the time to dedicate to them that they want. But ultimately, it's a decision that you will make because you love neurosurgery that much. And I thought he was a little, he may have, he was a little bit jaded of a view.
And they never hate you. It's just that they get very upset.
They get very upset. I'm in the process of planning.
Not just me, but like friends have been like texting me, his friends, being like, hey, is he okay? Like normally someone's a social butterfly. And like the fact that he goes silent on his friends, like his really good friends and like his family, they're texting me wondering if he's okay. And I'm okay saying, yeah, he's just at the hospital, he's working. I think it's hard. Is that hard for you?
It does. It definitely gets hard here and there. I think the thing is that when you have the time to communicate, you have to take those moments, particularly during arguments between friends, for example, Megan and I have had our fair share of arguments during residency. And sometimes you just have to understand a lot of where the negative emotions are coming from are actually coming from a place of frustration of not seeing you as often as they normally would or would like. And so you have to take a step back and be like, why are we yelling? Why are we having an argument? Well, a lot of the times it's purely because you just have to sit. You have to sit and be very, very open-minded and conscious of the fact that your partner is someone who you're going to rely on. And you're going to have arguments for sure, but sometimes the most important thing is just say, I hear you. And I am going to work on being home, more efficient at work so I can potentially come home at a more reasonable time. When I do have time, I'm focused on you. I'm not just focused here. I'm not texting, people at the hospital. Sometimes being able to just dissociate yourself from your phone, from your work, take off the iWatch and all that, I
think it's important, like not how much time you give me, but in the time you give me, even if it's 5 minutes, if you're fully focused on me, it feels better than you being like half there.
For sure. Absolutely. And that's something, this is also a learning process for me too, particularly because this is something where I want to have a very dynamic surgical life, but I also want to have a very dynamic family life at home. And particularly that's something as you guys are going through your own trails, be very cognizant of. One of the residents, he's actually attending now at Miami. He had 5 children during residency, and he's number 6 is on the way. But
I love that.
And then that's part of I heard that story and I was like, obviously this is a program then that you are able to have that. You're able to have a family in this program. You're able to have this dynamic family life. And so that's part of the reason, one of the main reasons I chose Miami. Our program itself does cater to that. to something that's very important to a lot of the attendings, and that trickles down to the residents. Do you have time for a hobby, not family related? Yes. Those are going to, the way that each program kind of organizes itself. Our programs, we work 12 days in a row and we get 2 days off. So we get basically a black weekend, gold weekend is what they call it. And so black meaning you would work through the whole 2 days, and then gold meaning you have the whole weekend off. We definitely like to explore Miami. We like to go places. There's a nice little winery that's in South Miami, the southernmost winery in America. They do,
not to say your hobby is drinking.
Not to say that, but just something simple as being able to just spend time with each other. Those are the hobbies that I have with her. Basketball. I try to get onto the courts as much as possible. Less frequent now, particularly because I'm definitely deconditioning, but we'll get there.
Yeah, and you have to take care of yourself. You can't just be playing rough sports. I mean, I think like you can really injure yourself in those sports.
You can, yeah.
And you can't risk that as a doctor.
Yeah. But I think other things that we like to do, something simple, just staying home, cooking with each other, watching movies. Actually, it's very, very, very adorable. Megan set up like a movie theater-esque vibe. So after this Zoom session, we're gonna just watch a movie. Something as simple as just kind of dissociating entirely from the hospital life and just focusing entirely, at least on us watching a screen.
Yeah. I mean, we live like right above a CVS, so it's easy to just go down there and get movie theater snacks. I don't know, just something to get away from it all. Like, I don't want him to come home to like a stressful place, like where I have expectations. Like, we should both just mellow out after work.
Yeah.
And if that takes a little creativity, I love doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I got very lucky. That's part of the reason I, wanted to show her off.
Oh my gosh, but it takes a lot of learning, honestly.
When I was at Duke, one of the professors there basically had he had a quote. Basically, I asked him about this. I asked him about family life and balancing it, because he was one of the assistant program directors there, a phenomenal gentleman. And my conversation with him was nothing about neurosurgery. It was all about his advice for me, just as an applicant, as a neurosurgeon going forward. And he said that you guys, we are so used to giving our all into something that unless I do something big and immaculate and grandiose, that she will never notice. I have to do these big gestures and everything, and that's not true. Should look at it like everything is assigned just 1 point. Sending her flowers is 1 point. Texting her, 1 point. Basically saying, I'm thinking about you, 1 point. And these points, they're not based necessarily on.
You really think about it in points.
In the sense that, points. Yeah, I'm just accumulating points. But in the sense
you're
that,
such a high achiever, like it needs to be rewarded.
Well, in the sense that, for example, if I come home with a huge bouquet of flowers, would you love me more than if I were to? Maybe she'll say yes.
I would love some.
But we're just we haven't seen each other in.
But he did come home with 2 big slices of cake from the cafeteria.
I did drink. For the record, the Jackson cafeteria cake is actually phenomenal.
Oh my gosh.
What are my thoughts on time management optimization for work-life balance? Efficiency at work implies efficiency necessarily efficiency at home, in the sense that if you kind of just wait for things to linger and fester, meaning consults to sit around, you basically, I could do this now versus I could do this later. If you do it later, more things pile up and you go home later. You go home more stressed, it's later, and then you basically have less time to spend. So the time management optimization is predicated upon 2 factors, in my opinion. Stratifying things as to most important, what is harmful what can hurt a patient. Does this patient need this test? Do they need this scan? And prioritize those things. And then in between, bust out the small things so you can, in fact, get everything done and then have reasonable time to go home. Our program is such where the interns, I'm one of the interns, we do buddy call every other day. So Monday, Wednesday, I'm on call, buddy call, meaning I stay on till 11 p.m. or later, whenever my job is finished. And then the next day I'm off. So for example, today I'm off and Damien actually is at the hospital right now on buddy call. And so while you're not on buddy call, those are the opportunities you can to be very efficient with work. So what that means is that prioritizing important tasks first, things that are very big priorities and take time, you should do first. And then the smaller things you can bust out. For example, on my whole way home, driving here, I had dictated a consult note. Those are the kind of things that you can do to be very efficient, such that you're always moving forward, so that when you come home, you can just sit and relax. There's always going to be times where work follows you home, but you try to want to minimize that. That's why I think time management optimization for work-life balance means minimizing how much work you do bring home. Understand that sometimes you will, and just don't make it so often that it gets off-putting for your partner. Is being politically active seen as a red flag when applying to neurosurgery? Sorry if it's not related to the topic today. No worries at all. In fact, some questions, some interviewers are going to ask you pretty politically jarring questions. And my like kind of opinion to that came to the fact that if you have a very strong opinion about something, try to be as reasonable with your answer as possible. You don't know the political affiliations of the people who are interviewing you, but at the same time, you don't want to come off as fake, because that's picked up very, very quickly if you're just a people pleaser. And then another thing is, if you're going to have that intense of a negative interaction with an attending based off your own political affiliation or political view, you also kind of have to keep that in mind as well if you want to endure that for 7 years. But at the end of the day, when I got asked political questions, I told what I thought about certain things, and in the most kind of not politically dichotomizing way, but in where it was very evident that where I stand on things. And we don't have to go into that now. Sorry, that kind of comes off as a little bit. I'm not taking a stance on, but your job during an interview is to basically. I'm being very political about it. If you're really passionate about something, don't allow the political activity of residency kind of jar you, or rather the fear of being politically active jar you from speaking the truth. And also, you're going to have multiple interviews. So if your interview totally tanks, and just, you can learn from that and kind of modify your answer. That kind of helps. We can also talk offline about kind of what that means. Do you think your salary as a resident is enough to support your family for the next 7 years? You will get an increase in salary every year, and depending on the program you go to, ultimately does something in the sense that, for example, my salary here as an intern is roughly like $58,000. To be totally frank, $58,000 roughly. In a place like Miami, where rent is pretty reasonable, here in Miami, that's not a terrible salary to live off of. And then Megan and I are not. Megan has as a profession as well. That makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, being just a couple, not even kids, like, we have a cat, that's it. But like, I was working as a barista, making almost nothing. It was just to like be busy. But then eventually I realized that, like, he was paying for rent or whatever, and I had to pay for parking and everything because I have a car. And even just as a couple, I personally felt like your salary wasn't comfortable with a wedding coming up, specifically, like a big expense coming up. Even if we are getting help for that, it's just, I don't know, I wasn't personally comfortable off just one salary. So it depends on your lifestyle. It depends where you want to live. So you could go, like, depending on the city that you live in. Like, even if I just talk about Miami, the further south you go, the cheaper rent is. But we're actually in Brickell. It's closer to the hospital, but it is more expensive. Everything's more expensive. Parking, apartment. So then you have to just, see where you want to put your money. It's about your priorities. You can definitely live off of your salary for sure.
Yeah.
It's just that maybe we're
kind of the lifestyle that you want to live.
Yeah, exactly.
If, for example, if you go, so as like an intern, roughly $58,000. if you go to a place like UCSF, for example, I only know these numbers because that's one of the places I was really looking at as well. They supplement your income with $12,000 additional per year, just to kind of help with housing. It is an expensive place to live. Michigan roughly also has like $58,000 or so, but the cost of living is much, much, much lower there. You can buy a full house in Michigan. University of Florida, Gainesville, you can buy a house in Gainesville, like 3-bedroom, 2-bath house for the salary there. Whereas in a big metropolitan area like Miami, you may not be able to buy a house off the bat as a resident, but a lot of residents do actually own houses in our own program. Like one of our PGY6s, he and his wife own a house. They do both work, but that is something where it's possible to do.
Yeah, I think most of the relationships we know of, they both work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had to get away from being a barista. I needed insurance. We're not married yet, so you can't get under the insurance until you're married. So I got back into the science field, I guess.
Sumedh, how much time do you have to spend studying outside of being in the hospital? Does that take away from your relationship time too? I probably should study more frequently than I do, I'll be honest. I just look at it like a lot of on-job learning. I do have step 3 coming up, for example, and so I'm trying to get more kind of like carve out time for that. There are going to be times for sure where you're going to go up and down in your studying life outside the hospital versus your relationship time. It does sometimes interfere in the sense that while Megan wants to do something, I have to, I'm so sorry, I have to study this for X reason for this much time. A lot of the time, Megan and I will kind of just do our own thing, but next to each other. And it's kind of like a surrogate way of at least being somewhat close to each other. So we're at least in the physical vicinity, and we can always kind of just annoy each other while we're studying or while we're doing work. Kind of just like be together at least. But it's a good question. I would probably say I probably should be like studying like 2 or 3 hours a day outside, but I probably spend like 30 minutes to an hour.
But remember when you first started residency, like you had no time. You were learning the ropes about everything in the hospital. Like there was no time when he first started. No time at all.
And I think a lot of that is, I started on a very, very busy service. And then on top of that, I started off in being a doctor truly a doctor for the first time, making some semblance of how the hospital system works, how the medical record system works, and all of that, and how just independent decision making. These are kind of things that you learn on the job, and when you come home, you kind of just do want to just sleep and relax. You will have time during residency to study for things like boards, study for things, kind of like your own research time. You do have to do research, I think, even within residency to be academically productive. And so that is its own topic. So you'll find time. It's just that in the beginning, you're learning how to be more efficient so that you can be more efficient with your time. If that makes sense. I think this one's for you.
What is an annoying thing that Dr. Shah does that future neurosurgical residents should avoid? Oh, yes. Okay. Oh my God. Yeah, it's like mainly the mess. Oh my gosh. Do not make messes like when you get home everywhere you go. Like,
kind of tough scrubs.
And he'll try. He'll be like, oh, I'll take care of the dishes, and then he'll pick them up and put them in the sink. Okay, now I have to go to the sink and then put them in the dishwasher.
I got better at that.
He is a good learner. So it's like these annoying things are just like around the house, like things I don't want to deal with when I come home from work either. But at the same time, I don't mind to a degree. It's just annoying.
So you would say that for future neurosurgical residents, when given a task, complete it.
I just say minimize your mess. Like take care of yourself and those around you, even at home. Like just because you're out of the hospital doesn't mean like let loose. Even just for yourself, if you were left in your own mess, if you don't have a significant other, is it comfortable coming home to a mess?
No,
like you want to treat yourself well.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think there is relationships in residency are uh, they're a very beautiful thing, and I think it's one of the things where, however you want to cultivate that relationship, no matter what residency you go to, there are going to be times where it's going to be pretty rough for your loved ones, for yourself, for your family, for your pet. He's up there. But ultimately, I think part of this journey through medicine, like through medicine, through life, is really it's shared. It's supposed to be shared with people. People intrinsically who go into medicine want to be around people. I think are generally people, people. So I think however you decide, if you're the kind of person who casually dates during residency, if you're the person who doesn't want to be in a relationship, if you're the person who wants to get married in residency, if you're coming in married into residency, you're going to have your own unique struggles. These are kind of the things that Megan and I have picked up on the way for the last 11 months.
Yeah.
And it's a learning process for us for sure. And right now we're actually in the process of planning our own wedding, which is also interesting in its own right, because me, for example, helping with planning the wedding, it gets pretty tricky. It does, particularly when there are certain things, there are certain questions that she has, like what do I have a preference of this versus that. A lot of times it's very easy to just be like, whatever you want, whatever you don't. But I think ultimately you don't want to just you want to be in a position where you have some control over the things in your life as well. You don't want just to be very passive about your personal life and your family life. I think it's an important thing to maintain an active participation in your family life. And that's something that does take time to learn. And as you become more efficient in residency, and as you become more efficient as being like a family member itself, I think it becomes easier. But
yeah, and it has been interesting because we're having a wedding. It's like people are texting in, like family and friends. So they want to know things or they want to talk to us. And so I think we get that a lot more because we're getting married. It's like your mom wants to know certain answers to questions about the wedding. So it's like call Sue Meg, call Megan and my mom and then our friends. It's like, I don't know, it gives them an excuse to reach out to us, even though like they know we're busy and I don't know how that would be normally. But I like it because we still get to talk to them, even though you're super busy. It's like it's still bringing the family and friends closer together at the same time.
for sure. So I guess we are kind of entering to like the 7:40, 7:45-ish zone. I want to leave some time for very specific questions if you guys have any. I know you guys have asked a lot of good questions. So is there anything, Megan, specifically that you would say is something that you learned, something that through this process that I should improve upon, something that you want to improve upon? I'm not saying that in any pointed way. Is there anything that I guess final thoughts?
Final thought. Yeah, I think that it's just a lot of like, there was one thing you said to me where you were like, some people say that you have to sacrifice a lot or you have to compromise. And those are such negative words. He's like, what I want to do with you is collaborate. Like, I want to come to an answer like that's positive, like from both ends. And that sat with me. And so I think that's what this journey has been about, is collaborating. How do we become the best family we can be together with your schedule and my schedule, and understanding and respecting each other, and just like let that take us somewhere like even better than what we had before, instead of looking at it negative. It's like it's all about perspective, I think.
I agree. I think the final thing that I would say is that you have to be cognizant. You have to actively protect the time, that you want to spend with your loved ones, because there will always be times where the residency is going to pull you one way, your attendings are going to pull you one way, your co-residents, as much as you love them, are going to pull you one way. And I do love my co-residents to a degree. Megan knows. Actually, I probably spend more time with Damien and Victor than I do with Megan. But at the end of the day, you have to ultimately sometimes just say, I'm going to spend today with my loved one. I'm not going to look at my phone. If someone really needs to contact me, they'll always be a way for someone to contact me. But you have to actively protect and defend the time that you want to spend with your loved ones, because if you don't, there's always going to be something that encroaches into that time. And it's your training, yes, but you're also a young professional, a young adult, and you also have to cultivate other aspects of your life as well. And a relationship is one of them. You can't just be a single-sided, in my opinion, a single-sided, single-faceted human being and expect to ultimately live a very fulfilling life. Some people, I guess, can, but you have to be very truthful for yourself and understand who you are. Your last question, or rather one question, how do you know you found the one? We're getting real philosophical here.
I think it's cute.
You think it's cute?
I knew.
Yeah. I think for Meg, I think it is a very big leap of faith, particularly in residency and relationship. At this time, I know of people. A good friend of mine. He was in a long-term relationship during residency and ended, and it did really, really kind of hurt him, particularly because it was towards the end of his residency. Obviously we always bounce back, but definitely, you want to just make yourself vulnerable. You know what I'm talking about.
We bounce back.
Yeah, we bounce back.
But how do you know you found the one?
I think ultimately how I knew Megan was the one is because I may have found something I love as much as neurosurgery.
That's so sweet. Because he told me, like, our first date, he was like, just so you know, neurosurgery, like, that's at the forefront of my mind. And I'm like, okay, totally naive, but that's all right. But he was just, I don't know, I loved his personality and just everything about him. And we just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of like clicked into gear.
Oh, we got lucky.
That's how you know. You know within the first like 15 minutes.
Is Dr. Lou joining? I hope so. Unfortunately, he may not be able to join. He himself is actually, fun fact, on vacation with someone that he is also dating as well.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. So it's obviously very possible to and Dr. Lou, he's one of the residents who has had, has been dating. He's not officially like, fiancé or anything like that. But in a committed kind of a relationship of sorts. So they're on vacation together right now. So I was hoping he'd be able to join, but
yeah, he definitely offers a way different perspective coming into it single. And yeah, it would have been nice to hear his side. For sure.
But I mean, ultimately, most of the places in residency themselves are in large metropolitan areas. You won't have a paucity of dating opportunity. It's more so the paucity of time that you have. But it's all, I mean, it's very possible.
We've heard like people are like, yeah, I still find time to date. We've even gone out like to dinner and found them on dates. And it's like, how do you have the time like to date? And it seems so hard, even just for my friends who aren't doctors, and they still make time. You can always make time, I guess.
Yeah. This is a very interesting question. Neurosurgery is so intense and specialized, and I wonder if it's reasonable to fear being with someone who isn't at least tangentially connected to it. If not for shared profession, is there a risk of having nothing to talk about after a while? Absolutely. And I think a lot of the time Megan and I, or at least have a relationship in the sense of we're both biologists. However, a lot of the residents, it can be as close as there is physically nothing closer possible than you marrying a co-resident. There's absolutely nothing closer to that than that. So I imagine they have nothing, they'll never run out of things to talk about.
Really?
Theoretically, but at the same time, I can't speak for their relationship. I just know that they're a very, 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 they're my seniors. They're a very good pair together. On the flip side, you can have someone who's completely not in medicine, someone who is in medicine. Those are also actually relatively valuable, I would think. If maybe not, maybe even more, because that provides another perspective. Because at a certain point, you don't want to get, Megan can tell you, it gets sometimes a little boring just talking about medicine. It does. I
didn't see that.
She didn't say I said it. But it's very cool because Megan has a lot of other interests outside of medicine, outside of science, art, biology.
Well, and your friends who have nothing to do with science, like you still talk to them about
things. Film producer, actuary, firefighter, computer science. Those are so like outside of residency, some of my best friends. So
do you ever run out of things to talk about with them?
Never, because I'll talk about an interesting case, and then my friend Jason will talk about, interesting like fire, I don't know. My friend Josh will talk about a very interesting film project he's working on. My buddy Kevin will talk about anything, honestly. He's anything. So no, I actually don't think that it should be it's necessarily a fear. You are going to have, as long as you itself are intrinsically interested in what they're interested in, at least from a standpoint of they're passionate about it, so you're at least interested that they're so excited about it, you'll be fine.
Do you feel like conversation is productive in that way, or do you feel like a lack of production when you don't talk about medicine?
No. In fact, I actually find it very I don't know. A lot of when I talk about medicine with Victor, Damien, a lot of it is like, okay, here's an interesting case. Let's commiserate over it for a moment, but we also kind of just know how it ends anyways, because it's a case we've all seen, or we talk about all the cases in conference anyways. We kind of complain to each other. So at a certain point, you don't want to just continue, talking about the same thing over and over again. So that's part of the reason why, when I spend time with Damien and Victor, we try to talk a lot about medicine, but a lot not about medicine. We're very conscientious about that because we know each other very well. I bring interesting stories from the hospital, HIPAA compliant, to my friends, and then vice versa. They tell me interesting things too, and I think it's actually pretty productive. You get a very interesting worldview about certain things. You're not just siloed into talking about medicine. A lot of the very kind of successful marriage in neurosurgery stories are of people who met during residency who are tangentially related to neurosurgery, but a lot of them aren't that way. Dr. Levy, our chairman, his wife is actually a reporter. So that's something where I imagine, I obviously can't think of the early team, but their dynamic, I imagine it must be phenomenal. So I think that, yes, there is reasonable to fear, but not something that should point you away.
Yeah, not something that should get in the way, for sure.
Danny John, thanks. You are welcome. But yeah, I mean, we're coming to the close. If there's any last questions, if there's any comments you have, if you don't agree with things that we said, for sure. I mean, that's totally reasonable. We definitely do not intend for this to be like, listen to us, we found the answer. In fact, it was we just started. Yeah, I mean, we have 6 years and 1 month to go of residency. So I imagine, sometimes we'll have big arguments. Maybe in the next year, we'll just be arguing and yelling at each other. But I think, this is a very dynamic learning process. And so far, we've at least made it work for this first intern year. It's a pretty tough year in Miami's residency program, but next year is when we start to take, at least I start to take independent night call at the hospital. So that's another dynamic of our relationship that we're going to have to kind of learn how to deal with. But I think,
dealing with the pager was such a learning curve.
We didn't even talk about that.
We didn't talk about
the pager.
We called it the baby because it would cry all the time in the middle of the night.
Yeah, when one of the hospitals, you take home call. Even as an intern, you're on home call, so you can theoretically be called into the middle of the night. And luckily, so I always actually put the pager on Megan's side because Megan would wake up and then wake me up.
I would too. You would not wake up, and I'd be like, Megan.
I have full on straight asleep while I'm getting a consult in the middle of the night.
So bad.
Hey, Dr. Shah, there's patient so-and-so. I'm like, click.
And then I'd be like, aren't you going to answer them?
Yeah, I full on hung up on someone while they were telling me about a patient. The patient did fine. I'm just luckily.
Yeah, you always jerk back and you're always like, oh.
Oh my gosh, I should probably call that.
Because we have gotten advice where you're supposed to wake up and sit up and answer.
You definitely do not want to make a decision while you're passing out.
That was a learning curve for sure, but eventually I think we got it.
Yeah.
and I learned how to sleep more through it.
Yeah, and I didn't get in trouble, so it all worked out. Are you guys gonna be hosting this next year as well? I hope so. This is something we want to keep as a recurring recurring thing. Potentially, as the PGY1 class incoming can kind of take over this as well. And I think particularly there's a lot of interest from your guys' end. Let Dr. Komatar know. Let Ingrid Menendez know. Their contact information is always available, and I can email you or send out my email as well. But hopefully, we can see how next year Megan and I have adapted, switched, changed. When you were MS 3 and 4 and doing extra work, mainly research towards matching successfully, when did you fit most of that in? Late nights, early mornings, either side of your medical school placements? Did that make it more difficult compared to residency when you can leave most of your work at home? Thanks. Yeah, honestly, a lot of the research that I would do, you'd have to carve out time, particularly when you're studying for classes and you had your own clinicals and stuff. A lot of it was late night. I tried to avoid things early mornings, just because I use that time just to get ready to go to work. But late nights, a lot of it were late nights, and weekends as well. And med schools will be easier because you don't have necessarily full weekend commitments. You can always, like those days, wake up earlier before Megan woke up, or go to bed later than she does and kind of bust out some work and then go to bed. That I kind of fit in like that. It's trickier in residency because you have very direct responsibilities that have significant consequences if you don't do them. Like, if you don't show up to round on your patients, the entire service line is halted for an entire day, and that's always like an absolute no-no. Or you'll get yelled at by an attending, and that's never a pleasant experience. For not doing your job, which you're a resident, it's your job to do that. Did that make it difficult compared to residency when you can leave most of your work at home? I wouldn't say so. You're going to have work at home if you want to do it. You're going to have work at the hospital if at the end of the day, you're just going to find time to do work, whether it's in the hospital or it's outside the hospital. It's totally predicated on how you're going to do it. It's a learning thing. Like for me, I do as much work as I can at home. So when I come home, when I do as much work as I can at work, so when I come home, the things I do take less time away from us.
But remember, so he actually took a gap year during medical.
I also did take a gap year.
And that was for research, like heavy research. And so that was it was quite a thing. Like, we were trying to figure out if you should do it or not. Like, is it worth it? Will it make your resume more successful looking, or whatever you need to get into residency? And we went for it. Yeah. So he moved out to San Francisco. I followed him. And that was fun.
That was fun. Yeah.
And that's kind of like, you fit that in because it's also really impressive, the scholarship you got. So it's like, it all fit in.
Well, at the end of the day, again, our job here was hopefully to help kind of just give you a perspective, a perspective on maintaining a love life and a family life in residency. It's possible. Definitely going to have ups and downs. It's going to be hard sometimes. It's going to be very easy other times. But at the end of the day, definitely this is also about having a balanced life in residency. And I think a lot of us in our generation are going towards balance in our lives. So I think that's hugely important.
Oh, I think you should also form a community. So we hang out with his co-residents outside of work, and then I get to meet their significant others. And so we just connect on different levels, and we're going through similar things. So we have a lot to talk about together. So even though I'm not involved in medicine, I still feel very welcome joining their group. And it's nice to meet people, especially during a pandemic.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But I think that's really important for you guys to wind down together and for me to get a perspective that's similar.
Yeah, definitely. What is one thing you wish you had done differently as a couple? It's a tough one.
Just a tough one for sure.
Different as a couple. Well, I know she wanted me to propose earlier than I did.
That was the first one.
She when her Pinterest started going from puppy dogs to and cats to diamond rings. that was like the first sign. But
But you ignored it.
I didn't ignore it. I just kind of like, I was like, oh, she likes.
I just
things.
think it's hard. Like, obviously, we didn't know a pandemic was going to happen. But also, you matching and starting your first year, I think this is hard. Like, trying to be romantic at the same time, he's just figuring out everything.
Yeah.
That's really hard. I think that's one thing that maybe we would do differently.
I think one thing that I personally would trying to do a little bit differently with is when we have vacation time, physically just kind of like leave and go do something exciting and fun. Like, I don't know, you can always just kind of have a staycation, but at a certain point, staycationing is like only as fun as it can be. I think that's the only thing. We're going to start trying to take trips. I think that ties in very close to the next question, which is, has COVID made this process easier or harder for both of you guys? Harder and easier. Harder. Harder in the sense that, when I come home, Megan, for example, wasn't vaccinated until just recently. And so when I came home, it was very I had to be very cognizant about, all right, well, I'm seeing very sick people. Like, I have to round up people who are COVID positive on a consistent basis. And despite me being on PPE up, I have to be very careful. So that's something that ultimately, you as a loved one or someone else are coming home with hospital germs and ickinesses. So you have to be very cognizant of that. You don't want to make your partner sick. That's kind of like poor form.
It also, like, we were planning this trip to Japan. Like, that's where he was going to propose, I guess. But we had to cancel our Japan trip, and that was so upsetting. And that just like cascaded, like all of our plans just like flopped until we made new plans.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And in some sense, it made it harder also because Miami is very much of an active, outdoorsy city. So in the beginning of this year, even, it was not as like necessarily fun per se. But now Miami's getting back into different.
But I think we were lucky being in Miami during the pandemic because it was pretty much open the entire time.
Yeah,
so we could like get outside and see people. I mean, I was never not around people in the city.
Yeah.
So I think we were lucky being here. I mean, being very safe, like as safe as possible with masks and hand sanitizer.
Well,
we didn't go clubbing.
We didn't go clubbing. Maybe so. But yeah, well, I think that pretty much takes us to 8:00. I thank you guys for listening and chatting along with us. Of course, this is obviously a learning process for us too. And if there's any, honestly, any suggestions that you guys have, now you've seen a little bit of our dynamic as well.
A little bit of it.
A little bit of it. So if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, things that you've seen work in your own careers as medical professionals, let us know. Obviously this is very new for us as well. I haven't been a resident for that long. And even within medical school, we had ways that we coped. We had ways that we figured things out, but residency is very different. So again, thank you guys very much for joining along. We actually have our next Zoom session next month. That will be a very interesting one. Damien, Victor, and I will be on together talking about what we call intern chronicles, our most interesting, most formative case of our intern year. And I think it'd be a good way to end our year worth of Miami Neurosurgery Resident Hour with an interesting case that we learned the most from. Some good, some bad, some life-changing for us and for others. So, thank you very much for joining along. And again, feel free to reach out for anything at all, and happy to continue the dialogue. But have a great Tuesday, you guys, and we'll see you next week. Oh, thank you for joining, Megan. All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.